and upper middle classes. Now the figure for our story here, the figure that whose life through which we tell the story of the transformation of Russia into the Soviet Union and beyond, is a man by the name of Peter Palchinski. And Loren Graham outlines at some length his own personal odyssey in trying to understand the life of Peter Palchinski, knowing that Palchinski was executed by Stalin or under Stalin in 1928, and knowing also that Palchinski was an engineer. I encourage you to read the preface to the book to gain a sense of Loren Graham's own personal odyssey. Palchinski was born in 1875, late 19th century. His father was a land surveyor, surveying often in the European context being a pathway leading towards engineering. This man had 12 children by 2 wives. Peter Palchinski was the oldest son raised by his mother. His mother came from a prominent family, although not particularly wealthy. She brought with her a large family library, and Palchinski was raised reading from that library. This is very important because he had access to literatures that other peoples in lower classes didn't have. He learned how to speak French and German, so we already know that he's fairly high-class status, even though there's not a lot of money in the family. In 1893, 7 years before the turn of the century, he takes an entrance exam for a distinguished engineering institute called the Mining Institute. There's with an entering class of about 35 students. He took the entrance exam, scored very highly on German, physics, math, and Russian, and entered and ranked, I think, something around the 20 out of 35. So we see that we have an upper middle class person, but nonetheless, and he had to prove and demonstrate his merit. When we get into talking about France, you'll see the importance of the entrance exam as a vehicle for demonstrating one's personal merit, one's merit as a person. He lived on a very modest budget, as you know, hopefully by having read this material by now. And he would graduate 7 years later in 1900 as a mining engineer. While he was at school, he worked during the summers as a laborer on railroads, in factories, and even in a coal mine in France. And arguably through this work gained a strong sense of the experiences of laborers. At an early age, probably through his reading, he was attracted to what were then fairly radical political doctrines, and I'm going to help you understand some of these doctrines, because understanding them is the vehicle for gaining a sense of how engineering gained political meaning in the Soviet Union. He was interested in visions that promised a better society than what he and many understood as a very authoritarian and poverty-stricken land. So even as a student, he was somewhat of a political mover and shaker. Before graduating in 1900, he got married to Nina Alexandrovna, and the two of them then left to go off into his government assignment because he was supported by a government stipend. His first job as an engineer, and you see now his experience thus far pretty much fits a class-based system of engineering education. He goes off to work in the Ukraine, studying or contributing to the analysis of the coal mining system in the Don Basin. The Don Basin was producing 70% of Russia's coal. Because he was new and young, he was given the less valuable or less valued responsibility of exploring the worker question, which he, and being someone trained to pay attention to details, he collected a huge amount of data on housing, on workers' lives. And he began to write reports on documenting the difficult dimensions in workers' lives, which heretofore was not even considered as part of, in a way, the industrial production system. He even wrote an article, which he and published it in the Mining Journal, presenting some of these data. And that event marked a change for him as people began to realize the political implications of these data. In a way, it's the first time in which his argument about an engineering process, the process of coal production, began to be interpreted in political terms, because indirectly this was a critique of the czarist structure and involved a critique of the exploitation of workers. And Palchinski is sent off to Siberia. Works there for a while, still as a consultant. Finally escapes in 1907. He returns to the Ukraine for a little while and then leaves for Western Europe. He had been exiled to Siberia for 8 years, and since he hadn't served out his exile, he needed to split for Western Europe.